Hello. Hi, Dr. Ibu. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Good evening, folks. Welcome to another edition of Hearing Connections. We are here, Facebook Live, and we are on LinkedIn. This afternoon, we have the pleasure of Dr. Ibu joining us here to discuss clinical research and the importance of having diversity and inclusion, not just as participants, but also as researchers. I met Dr. Ibu a few years ago. I think we were in a community meeting, and he told me that he was in clinical research, and I was just totally um, enthralled by the idea that we had a clinical researcher here in Beaumont. So, Dr. Ibu, could you please share with us a little bit about yourself? Who are you and where are you from? We can't hear you, Dr. Ibu. Can you hear me? We can't hear you. Okay, let's see. Let's see if we can troubleshoot to make sure we can hear him. We are working on it, making sure we're able to hear. I mean, my mic is muted here. Hello.
All right, there
Oh,
we go. Can you hear me now?
yes.
All righty,
Yes. All righty.
excellent, excellent.
Thank you for your patience, and thank you, listeners, for your patience. We are off and running. Dr. Ibo is with us, and we're observing National Minority Health Month. And as I stated before, a few years ago, I met Dr. Ibu in a public health forum, and he told me he was in clinical research. I was extremely excited because we had a clinical researcher here in Beaumont. So, but we've never ever talked about everything that he does. So, this is a great opportunity to sit down and talk a little bit more about clinical research. So, could you please tell us, Dr. Ibu, a little bit more about yourself, where you're from, and your company, Gadolin Research?
Well, thanks for having me, Cordella. I was originally born and raised in Nigeria. Moved to the U.S. for my education and some part of my medical training. Eventually, I landed into, I guess by happenstance, I landed into clinical research, and I haven't looked back ever since. My partner and I started Gatling Research here in Beaumont in 2017. The company was formed in 2015, but we really got going in 2017. And our goal as a clinical research, clinical trials site is to bring cutting edge medicine to Southeast Texas, effectively to bring opportunities that otherwise individuals living in our community would have to drive miles and miles away to be able to obtain or fly to other locations to participate in. And so we see ourselves as a clinical research site, but also a way to support our community and to bring cutting edge technology and medicine to them.
That is great. It's very interesting because myself, I moved here from Jamaica and through New York. And when I got here, I noticed many people would have to go to Houston or elsewhere for cutting edge medical care. So it is great to know that as we address healthcare disparities and disproportionalities, access is key in ensuring that, we can level that playing field when it comes to getting equitable care. Now, one of the things that COVID-19 has brought to us, we talk about disparities and disproportionalities in healthcare. There were very few people from ethnic communities included in clinical trials. And going forward, why do you think that was? And how do you think we can level that playing field in having more ethnic people represented in clinical trials?
I think part of the problem is that there's a historical distrust or mistrust or um, oh, oh yeah, historical. You can't ignore the historical context. Is what I'm trying to say. When we look at all the things that have happened, Henrietta Lacks, Tuskegee, all these events, not just here in the U.S. but globally with clinical research and the birth of the industry itself, and the regulations that guide it, were all born from individuals abusing the trust where that the public had given them, and this hasn't this the concern is hasn't gone anywhere. It's still very present, and is still a barrier for people to even get health benefits that may be of benefit to themselves or the family, because they just don't trust the process, and that's unfortunate.
How do you think we could address trust? Because one of the issues with uh, diversity and inclusion in clinical research is that the product must represent the people who it's designed to treat. So how do we build that trust between yourself as a provider or a professional in the field, a provider, and those of us who are act as gatekeepers? We're seeing patients every day, and we're seeing medical illnesses. How do we build that trust to get people to sign on for clinical research?
That's a multi-billion dollar question. One of the things is that you find out very quickly that you cannot intellectualize. This is not an intellectual issue where people aren't learning enough about research or they don't understand research. There's an emotional resistance in some cases to participating in research. And that's not a situation where you can sit somebody down and say, hey, this is what the study is about. This is why it's safe. This is the benefits. These are the risks. And this is why you should participate. This is why potentially it could be of benefit to you. You have to first get through that emotional resistance. And that comes from building that trust and education about the clinical trial process, where the industry was and where it is right now. Acknowledging as well all the concerns that individuals have had in the past, and then explaining why those concerns have been addressed and why we can move forward with confidence, really. And then you can then get to the studies and how they benefit them and the pros and cons of participating in the studies. But if those primary concerns are not addressed initially, it's a failed effort automatically.
Okay, so I understand you in saying that those concerns have to be addressed before that participant gets to you.
Yes.
So that means it's going to take a wider community and it's going to take non-traditional partners. Maybe it's going to take the church, maybe it's going to take the school, maybe it's just not going to be you wanting something, a new drug coming out on the market, and there's need for participants, because that's the end. That's really the end of this journey. It has to be where we are learning ahead of time about the importance of clinical trials and trusting the process along the way. And maybe this is good for a small community, because in small communities we have to rely on each other. Do you think that, or how do you see us working together in this community to build that trust, so we can at least get our residents accepting of clinical research? And I'm not saying that we're not accepting of clinical research. I'm just saying, looking at the overall studies, very few minorities participate in clinical research.
The I think all right, I have some feedback on my end. I think we have to lay the groundwork first, like you said, Cordella. See, for example, we're about to start an Alzheimer's study. It's a treatment study for Alzheimer's. It's through Eli Lilly. It's looking very promising. Let's say I have a patient who would qualify for this study. They would benefit by participating in this study. The family members will benefit by participating in this study. That patient, in some instances, I wouldn't even get to explain all of that because of that barrier that's there. Once you hear research, they're done. They're done. They don't want to hear anymore. The demeanor changes. People almost get, sometimes people get really irritated just you talking to them about research. We have to build the groundwork. We have to lay the foundation. We need education, and the community needs to be aware, first of all, that they can participate in research, the benefits of research, how far research has come, the guardrails to ensure patient safety, the guardrails to ensure that their patients are cared for, the guardrails to ensure that if something goes wrong while you're participating in research, understanding that the care will not be the cost of care would not be your burden. The companies will pay for any kind of injury that anybody may incur during research, which is not typically the case. Understanding that there layers of institutional institutional review boards that oversee these studies, understanding that it is not in the financial interest, the way the industry is structured, right? It is not in the financial interest of the pharmaceutical companies to have bad press when it comes to minorities participation, or disregarding the health and safety of a company, of a clinical trial participants. It is not in their interest at all. They would lose billions and billions. They could lose billions of dollars in investments in research. The FDA will go ahead and write them up. It's got a 483. They will get a 483, and they would have to. It's a mess for them, and it's hard to recover. I'll give you an example. AstraZeneca right now is having a PR issue with their COVID vaccine. Some people may have heard of that with AstraZeneca. It's going to be very tough for them to move forward with that vaccine, perhaps in the US, because the I guess the community or the population there's a lack of trust with the work product because of their poor PR. That company is going to have a hard time recovering. And the same thing, any pharmaceutical company understands that it's going to hit them in their bottom line if they do anything to endanger subjects, and it's known. So a lot of guardrails are in place. The risk of the events of the past happening, it's minimal. It's minimal. And you also have to, I guess there also needs to be an understanding that it's not just the pharmaceutical companies, the doctors involved in the research as well. Don't go scot free. Everybody is responsible for the safety of the patients while they're participating in clinical trials. And that's the number one thing in clinical trials, is paramount before anything else: patient safety.
Okay, so I'm a patient and I've decided that I'd like to participate in clinical trials. What do I need to know?
So
What should I look for?
the first thing and the most useful tool I would say is If you're a patient or if you're just interested in participating in clinical trials, clinicaltrial.gov is an excellent website. It lists all the clinical trials that are ongoing. I believe it's globally, actually. All global clinical trials are listed on clinicaltrials.gov. So you could go there and put in your zip code, and it'll tell you all clinical trials in your area, in that zip code, or in that county that you could participate in. And then you can then select which one you may qualify for or which ones you might be interested in, and then you could then go to the website of those companies or those facilities and look at the reviews and or go to their Facebook page or call them up and ask more questions that are more specific to the trial. But that'll be the first start.
Do I need my physician's approval before I participate in a clinical trial?
No, you do not. You do not need your physician's approval to participate in a clinical trial. It's an independent decision that you would have to make if it's to your benefit to participate in the trial.
After I get involved in a clinical trial, I've signed up, I'm excited about participating. Can I change my mind?
Great question, Cordelia. You can. This is one of the wonderful things about participating in clinical trials. Once you sign the consent form to participate, you can withdraw consent at any time without penalty.
Okay.
There's no penalty. There's no concern. In fact, once you withdraw consent, that's it. Nobody can try and convince, should be trying to convince you to continue to participate. You've said your piece. You don't want to participate anymore, and that's it. Now, you may be approached to have what we call a closeout visit, which is basically to ensure, like, hey, you started out with this investigational drug. We're just gonna have one more visit to make sure that we establish a baseline of your health before you leave. But you can also decline that as well. So there's no obligation at all.
Okay, okay, that's great because sometimes we think that if we've signed on the dotted line, we're in it for the long term, and particularly as these are trials, and sometimes they're different stages. So one would think they'd have to continue through all the stages. But what about patient confidentiality? Would you secure my demographic information like my physician would?
So when you participate in a clinical trial, it is important as a clinical site, where I guess the location where the trial is conducted is considered a site. It is very important for us to be able to communicate with you and to be able to reach out to you and as the study goes along. But also for the purpose of the study, a lot of studies are stratified by demographics. So race, age, gender, but all the data collected during the clinical trial is de-identified. And what that means is that once you come on site, well, everybody on the site in the clinic here would know who you are and will call you by your first name, but on paper you have a number. And everything that leaves the site, the clinical research location, leaves with that number and not your name. So the number could be 1022, 1068, or something of that sort. And that's how your data is identified throughout. So nothing about you, about none of your personal information is exposed. Your privacy and confidentiality is maintained per HIPAA.
Okay, that is good to know because I mean, we're in the stage now where we're very concerned about our confidentiality, in regards to medical records. So that is, and if these are trials, we also want to know that other people won't have access to our medical records. Now,
Yes.
I noticed that COVID-19 has impacted clinical trials, not only in the sense of the development of the vaccines, but in clinical trials, in the longevity of trials. Some of them have been interrupted because of the with physical distancing and offices closing, and then with funding. Have you seen any disruption in the trials you're doing? And do you think there are any safety issues that we should be concerned about in participating in clinical trials in the midst of COVID?
Um, early during the pandemic, there were some disruptions. But it was I guess it was this was good. This was positive disruptions, I guess. When the pandemic started, a lot of pharmaceutical companies and a lot of clinical research sites paused patient visits, patient enrollments, and paused the studies because safety was a concern. How do you have it was really, really confusing initially because we didn't know how to operationally and safely bring in patients and not put them at risk of uh, of catching of coming down with COVID. What the impact of COVID, though, has been, I would say, a blessing on the industry because it has accelerated things that would otherwise take 10 years, 15 years to implement within this industry that moves at a snail pace, where it's forced the industry to accept technology and change the fundamentals of how clinical trials are designed and structured. For example, we have more hybrid trials right now and decentralized trials where patients may not even need to come to a physical site like mine. They could be shipped all the study materials, and they could go to a lab quest and get the blood drawn there, and then they might meet with the physician, just like we're talking right now, and a nurse could then go to their home and visit with them. So the decentralization of clinical trials is one of the that's one of the impacts of COVID, which is good for patients overall.
Right.
Then I guess this is more internal, more inside baseball stuff, but also just the processes and speed to which clinical trials are being executed. It's a second another benefit. A lot of people are worried about the COVID vaccines and the speed at which they were approved and the studies were done so quickly. And that's part of that's as a result of the necessary changes that had to be made due to COVID. We had to expedite things and basically ask ourselves as an industry, what is important? What is important? I'll give you an example. To start a clinical trial study, it used to take at least 3 to 6 months. That's from the time I hear about the study to the time I start. It would be 3 to 6 months, and that all of that is a whole bunch in between. The timeline is a whole bunch of emails, sending out documents, the pharmaceutical companies doing sending their representatives to come inspect our sites to make sure that we are what we say we are, and a whole bunch of preparation, training, regulatory documents. All of that has been especially for the COVID studies, was 2 or 3 weeks. That's basically
Wow.
what had to happen for COVID.
Right.
So everything that was necessary, we figured out, well, we could expedite stuff, and we figured out what was important, what wasn't, and we just kind of constricted the timeline. And so the other outcome was COVID. COVID made it. I think everybody just became more serious about clinical trials. All like everybody involved in it. Sites were more active about trying to get patients. Pharmaceutical companies were very supportive of the efforts of the clinical research sites. The FDA was very flexible, trying to figure out how to apply the regulation, and they were very responsive. IRBs were also very nimble and in approving the studies very quickly and turning them around. And as a result, we saw that, well, if we can do this for COVID, why can't we just keep doing this?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the industry is right now.
Right, because I know that, they've issued the emergency use agreements for the vaccines, and millions of people have been vaccinated through that. Do you think, or do you see anything forthcoming that would also receive emergency use agreements as we put ourselves out of this sphere with COVID?
I think, well, I think that let me see, because what I think is less important. The pharmaceutical companies do think, yes, the
Yeah.
pharmaceutical companies think there's still room for more therapeutics. In fact, we have we're going to be working with AbbVie on a COVID treatment study. It's a monoclonal antibody that AbbVie is working on to help treat patients with COVID and individuals who are exposed to COVID. So
Right.
so it's on both. So you get treated if you have a positive test, and you get treatment if you've been exposed to prevent you from catching COVID. So there's still quite a bit out there. I think the main concern is really there's not a whole bunch of COVID patients out there to support the studies, which is a
Yeah.
good problem, I guess, to have.
Yes.
But there's still quite a bit out there in the pipeline that might receive EUA. But what we're seeing though industry wide is that the pharmaceutical companies are changing their or at least diverting some of the resources and emphasis back to non-COVID therapeutic spaces. So everything else that was before COVID.
Okay,
So,
because life
so
still goes
that's the
on.
mission. Life still goes on. Before COVID,
Right.
there were a whole bunch of things that were important. Therapeutic spaces that are quite important, and so they're going back and focusing their attention there.
Okay, great. I have a question in the chat, and it's asking, does one have to be in optimal physical health to participate in a clinical trial?
No, the in fact, the so every clinical trial there's something called an inclusion exclusion criteria. The way I like to explain it very simply is that for the purpose of research, we are trying to make every patient in the study look like one person, right? So the inclusion criteria will list all the findings that a patient must have for them to be included into the study. And the exclusion criteria will list everything that a patient would have for them to be excluded from the study. And so every patient in the study has to meet both the inclusion and not meet any of the exclusion criteria. So the your health status really doesn't matter as long as it falls into the inclusion criteria.
Okay, great. Another question for you is, do you think colleges and universities are doing enough to get minorities excited about clinical trials? I think it's to be the researchers, to be clinical researchers.
Oh, to get them into the industry?
Yes.
Okay, so let me answer that question a little more broadly. Well, if you say colleges, I guess to answer that question, for colleges, I really don't know. I don't think that colleges really have any skin in the game per se. They just try and push whatever programs they have, and and it's to them. I don't know if it makes a difference to college if it's a math student or a student with interested in clinical research. They're just trying to push their program. Um, I guess, but on a broader sense, though, even within the industry, there's not an emphasis of, in my opinion, and there's not an emphasis of minority participation within the clinical trial industry, and I suspect it has to do with the data-driven nature of the industry. Tends to blind people to that because our deliverables for our industry is the data, is the numbers. It's
Okay.
very so it's
Yes.
not about nobody's really focused on who's delivering that data. Is the
Yeah.
data, the quality of the data good, and was it delivered on time? Was it delivered per protocol, per research protocol? So there's really not an emphasis on that, which is problematic because we have very low minority participation in research.
Right.
So if you want and so everybody talk about increasing minority participation in research, but the way to do it is to increase minority
Researchers.
researchers, and the way to do that is to educate, expand, and provide opportunities. And so it's kind of a catch-22 if your emphasis is just strictly about the data and the data quality.
Okay. Because my listener says that's a surefire way to build trust in clinical research. People trust who look others who look like them.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. I
yeah.
and whoever said that, that is very true. People, that's one definite way to build trust is to help to have people that look like you tell the story, and and that is one way to that is definitely one way to build trust.
It has to be
Um,
relatable.
yes,
It
yes,
has to be relatable. Yeah.
exactly.
So you mentioned that you're working on, or there's a study on Alzheimer's.
Yes.
Anything else new coming out regarding clinical research, and how can our local citizens reach you? How they can participate? How can they participate?
So, yes, the Alzheimer's study, I can't emphasize that one enough. We are all excited about it. The data looks very promising. So, if anybody that's listening out there has knows anybody that, could participate or could potentially benefit, please just email info@gatlinresearch.com. Just send us your contact. Just shoot us an email. We'll reach out to you, and part of the reason why we're excited about this study is because from the now this is very narrow data set that we've collected. The potential results of reducing the amyloid burden of the brain. Now let me step back and explain what that means. Alzheimer's is caused by plaques that develop in the brain. Some of these plaques start developing as early as your 40s,
Hmm.
and the accumulation of these plaques in the brain results in what we know as Alzheimer's or dementia. And the study we're working on, the treatment is supposed to, I guess we're full disclosure, is a trial, so we're hoping it works. But it's supposed to reduce the burden of those plaques, so lower the amount of plaques. So in other words, untangle the brain. And so that's what we're working on. It's an excellent study. Patients get excellent care throughout the study. They get this. Here's another thing about this study. The two ways to, I guess there's really two definitive ways to confirm a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. Every other diagnosis of Alzheimer's is just clinical. Basically, the neurologist will get a clinical picture and assessment and say, hey, based on the scales and based on the feedback, this looks like Alzheimer's. The definitive diagnosis for Alzheimer's are PET scans, which are expensive to get, and an autopsy of the brain, and you see the plaques. I mean, the latter is really not the preferred way to diagnose Alzheimer's.
Exactly.
So for the purpose of this study, patients who qualify go through screening will get free PET scans, free MRIs, so they'll get a confirmatory diagnosis that yes, for sure, 100% this is Alzheimer's. That's the condition, is not some other form of dementia. And then you also get a free MRI as part of it, as part of the study, and you get two PET scans to make sure to confirm that the diagnosis of Alzheimer's. So it's a really good study. Patients that typically participate in these kind of studies really enjoy participating in the studies, as well as caregivers. Um, uh, they participate in this study as well. One last thing about the study is patients do get compensated to participate. So there is some remuneration for time and effort for both patients and caregivers.
That's fantastic. Is there an age, a minimum age to participate?
Yes, it's 60 to 89 for this study. And this
Okay.
is one of the fields really, Cordella, that I'm excited about because I'm looking to expand the participation or just expand the number of studies in Southeast Texas, Alzheimer's studies that we have here in Southeast Texas. But for this particular study, 60 to 89.
89.
Yeah. And so hopefully we'll have other studies, and some studies is typically 55 to 75 or 80. So they all vary with their age group. So my goal is to have something for everybody.
Yeah, that's great because uh, Alzheimer's does affect people at younger ages too. We just, think we're tired or, a little bit forgetful, but it could be early onset Alzheimer's. For to participate in this Alzheimer's study, it's info at Gadolin, GADOLIN, research.com. Please send your emails to Dr. Ibu. He will definitely be in touch with you and let you know how you can participate. Another question for you is, Does one have to be insured to participate in clinical trials?
No, no insurance needed. Just bring yourself to the clinic, and that's all you need. There's no insurance required. You don't get a bill at all. In fact, you get like I said, you get a lot of patients get compensated for the participation in trials. And I have to be careful with my language. It's not compensation. It's considered remuneration for time
Remuneration.
and yes, for reimbursement for time and effort. Really, is the proper way to say it. But you get reimbursed for your time and effort, and that varies from study to study. In some studies it's really high, and some other studies it's much lower.
Right. Somebody wants to know, Michelle would like to know, how long does the Alzheimer's study last?
Excellent question. So that is a 2-year study, and so participants and their caregivers. So for the Alzheimer's study, it's the participant and a caregiver have to be part of the study. The caregiver is, I guess, defined as anyone who spends at least 10 hours a week with the patients, but they both have to be part of the study, and that's a 2-year study. It's one visit a month.
Mm.
You come on site and you get the treatment. If you qualify for the study, you come on site, you get your treatment on a monthly basis, and we do a bunch of assessments to see how the disease is progressing or not progressing. And then the caregiver also plays a role, because we need to verify some information from the caregiver as to how the patient is doing, their cognitive functions, and everything else. And so in this study, and this is fairly, I guess, not unique, but it's unusual. Both the caregiver and the participant get compensated for their time and effort.
Okay.
So
So
it's a 2-year commitment for this study.
a 2-year commitment with remuneration for both caregiver and client, and they must be 62 to 89 years old,
Yeah.
and it lasts for 2 years. One does not have to get clearance from their primary care physician to participate. No insurance is needed to participate, and you do not have to be in optimal physical health. And this is for any clinical trial.
Any clinical trial, yes.
Okay. Andy is asking if Gadolin also does research on other things such as, oh, he's asking tests, like lab tests and so on, or is it just medications?
So we do not do so the lab for lab testing. We don't. That's not our emphasis. We're primarily clinical trials with pharmaceutical companies.
Okay.
The device testing is also a part of clinical trials and lab tests and all of that, but it's just not our primary emphasis. No.
Okay. Okay. So I'm sorry, Andy, to participate in those. Would Andy be able to go back to the website to clinicaltrials.gov
Exactly.
to find those? Okay, to find those opportunities. Okay, Andy, clinicaltrials.gov, and that website will also lead you to clinical trials in your local community. Dr. Ibu, thank you so much. I always enjoy talking to you. You
Same
are
here.
always on the cutting edge and looking forward to doing more in our community. Is there anything else you would like our audience to know about the services that you provide?
Um, what I'll if there's any take home message I want individuals to whoever is paying attention to know is that it's I've had some studies where patients declined a clinical trial to their own um unfortunately to their own disadvantage, and part of the reason was they didn't, partly because they didn't educate themselves enough about the trial, or they were afraid of some aspects of it. So I would encourage anyone who's interested in any trial, or if that opportunity ever arises and you feel that is of benefit to you, to educate yourself about it. Just learn about it. Every clinical trial does an informed consent form, and read the informed consent form and just make sure that you understand the risk and the benefits, and make that determination if that trial is for you based on your circumstances and not based on your fears.
Ah, that's important. That's good to know. Clara wants to know. She says, "Yay on Alzheimer's study. What else are you working on?"
So right now we have a maternal RSV vaccination study for pregnant moms. That's an interesting one because RSV, due to COVID, because of COVID, there hasn't been an RSV season.
Right.
And what we're seeing in other countries is an acceleration of RSV. In fact, just another RSV's epidemic is showing up in Australia, and where COVID has somewhat receded.
See that.
And so we're
Right.
looking at that happening here in Texas, actually, because we kind of follow some of the trends in other countries. We're looking at that actually happening here in Texas, where we're going to see a spike in RSV coming up anytime this year. Nobody knows when. So we have a maternal RSV study, and the concept is quite interesting. It's basically protecting mom so that baby is protected. It's kind of like insurance for your baby. Mom gets vaccinated so that when baby is born with immune protection against the RSV virus for the first 3 to 6 months of life. And so that helps prevent baby from falling sick severely with RSV. So that's an interesting one we have. We have the COVID study as well that I discussed. We have the Alzheimer's study. We have an eczema study. We have an Alzheimer's agitation study. We're a multi-therapeutic site, so we
I
do
see that.
quite a little bit of everything, really. And if you go on our website, I think our IT team is working on the website, but I think by in a week or two, we should have all of our studies listed on our website. So if anybody's interested, they could just reach out and or go online, and they should be able to be well educated on what we have going on.
Okay, that is great. Um, Michael is asking for the maternal fetal study. Do moms have to be in a particular trimester before they can
Yeah,
participate?
yes. It's 24 to 36 weeks pregnant.
24 to 36 weeks. Okay.
Yes, it's 24 to 36 weeks pregnant, and in good health for that study.
And in good health. This is all fantastic. This is great information. We, got some good questions from the chat. I am really looking forward to seeing more people, develop an interest in participating in clinical trials and also in young people participating in research, because this is an exciting time for us to get involved in addressing the diversity and inclusion that we're looking for throughout medical care. I mean, if we're going to be the patients, we also want to see ourselves as providers. We're going to be participants. We also want to be there as researchers as well. So listeners, please log on to Gadolin. Sorry, it's info@gadolinresearch.com, and you will find out what clinical research is in process with Gadolin Research and how you can participate. Send your inquiries there, and Dr. Ibu will be happy to get back to you. He is around town. When you see him, wherever you see him, say hello. He's been a great resource. He's been a great resource for us, a great champion. I met him a few years ago, and you were working then on an STD study.
Yes.
Yes. So as he said, he's multi faceted. He's not just here doing any one tier diagnosis, and what he does represents the needs of our community, which is why you won't have to go to Houston for care. You can actually stay here, participate in your trial, and go back to work without paying for parking in Houston. So, so that's great. Any parting words from you, Dr. Ibu?
I guess let me see. Parting words. I think we talked about this a while back ago, but I can't emphasize it enough. If we don't have minorities participating in research, we're not gonna be represented in the data. And if we're not represented in the data, when that medication or that therapeutics comes to market, we're not going to be represented in the benefit. It's a cascade of events. That number has to go up. It just has to go up. And so, whatever concerns we have, whatever cares we have, I'm not saying we need to throw them away. No, we need to get them addressed. If we don't know, then we need to know so that
Yes.
we can then do better. Now, when we know, we can then act right. We can then do better. But if we don't know and we're not educated and we're concerned, we need to overcome our fears and read up on it and make sure we don't give away the benefits to others who will readily accept them and then discard them for ourselves.
Thank you so much. That is, those are, good take-home words. I know that a lot of times we want to go to war, but we don't want to be on the front line, and there's no other way to do it but just do it. Just go in and
Hmm.
get it done because we're all benefiting from the research that other people participated in. So this is
Exactly.
a great way for us to leave a legacy behind in knowing that we were participating in something that will make life better for other people along the way.
I agree. Well said.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to speaking with you again. If you have any questions, Dr. Ibu, can they email you any further
And
questions?
absolutely. Any questions, concerns, ideas, absolutely, please reach out.
Okay, please reach out info@gadolinresearch.com. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, I enjoy our friendship and I'm looking forward to speaking with you soon.
Thank you, Cordelia. It's a privilege.
You're welcome. Bye bye.
Take care.